It's my great pleasure to host this conversation with these four young people on the question of the future, on what next. So if over the course of today we've heard from a remarkable array of First Nations leaders, church leaders, public leaders, all exploring how we've got to this moment and what we need to do next, I think we can all agree that really the people we want to hear from now are young people, are people who have the responsibility for the future. And so, no pressure at all, everybody, but it falls to you now to figure out a way forward for the rest of us in 40 minutes or less. They have pretty good poker faces. I thought we could begin perhaps by having each of them introduce themselves, and then I'll ask a series of questions, and really the idea here is for the four of them to have a conversation about what they've heard today, what they've learned, and where we could take this conversation, and more importantly, where action could lead thereafter, all in the context of Call to Action 62. So, we could begin right here. Matthew.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Hendzel. I am a Jesuit scholastic, and I am here at in addition to being a Jesuit scholastic, I'm also a PhD student at St. Michael's. And in addition to that, I also do some part-time ministry at St. Anne's Parish, which holds the Archdiocese Native Peoples Mission.
Karolina?
Siguli, everyone. My name is Karolina Jonsson. The name that was given to me in the Longhouse is Yagugandi. My family is Bear Clan from Oneota'aga First Nation, which is Oneida Nation. I'm also of Lenape and Swedish descent, so I'm actually born and raised in Sweden. I've been in Canada since the 90s, been working on and off reserve since then, going to school. I've been at Council Fire, which is located downtown since 2007, working with youth at risk. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Trevor?
Sego se waguego wagat nualados, Jadonia Daza Youngets, and Alota Huni Wagita Lodo. Hello, my name is Trevor Roundpoint. My Mohawk name is Jadun Hidaze. I'm a Wolf Clan member of the Akwesasne Mohawk Nation. I'm also a member of the Operating Engineers, Local 793. Father of one, and one more in the oven.
Luke.
So hi everyone, my name is Luke Bannon. I just finished my second year of undergraduate studies here at the University of St. Michael's College. I've been involved with different student leadership opportunities here at St. Mike's, and just over this past academic year, I was serving on the St. Michael's College Student Union as the Religious and Community Affairs Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. So question one, Luke, you've got the mic, why don't we keep it with you. What were you expecting to learn today, and what have you learned? Two-part question.
So coming into this experience, I grew up in the GTA. Unfortunately, I didn't really learn about the residential school system I grew up going to Catholic schools in elementary, high school. The first time I had the opportunity to learn about it, or Indigenous culture and the history, was actually here at St. Mike's in first year. One of the reasons I was attracted to St. Mike's, they have a first year, a smaller size class called the Cornerstone Program. It's a social justice class. I like it because it was smaller, and we do have the opportunity like this to have discussions and conversations. And so that was my first opportunity to learn about it. But what I was hoping to learn today was to continue to learn about Indigenous culture and history, more about the treaties. To be honest, I didn't really know a lot about the treaties, or unfortunately, the Canadian government side of not living up to their end of the treaties. And also how, in response to the call to action number 62, how different organizations like the Jesuits and the leaders here at St. Michael's College were wanting to respond or try to implement that call to action. And then what I've learned today, a lot of information, everything from about what the treaties were or what they are now, how they're implemented today on reserves or here with the different communities. I had the opportunity last night at the dinner at the Toronto Fire Council, the Cultural Center, to interact with people, representatives from the Mother Teresa Middle School. I've been able to interact with Trevor and people from Saskatchewan, and it's just been a great opportunity for me to be here and just to take it all in, to learn a lot for sure.
Thank you. Karolina?
We're going to skip one?
Well, that way doesn't go ding, 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 ding. It keeps it lively for everybody.
I wasn't ready for that. I'm just kidding. I'm actually not sure. I didn't really have any expectations in terms of today. Coming from a background of going to college, getting a diploma in Indigenous Studies, psychology at university level, you know, I find that I've done the most learning on a daily basis since I left school, you know, and that's working with our community members. And those teachers are sitting right here. There are survivors, there's our community members, our clients, our staff, young and old, that are right here from Toronto Council Fire. And that's where I learned every day. So I wasn't sure at all what I was going to find here today, but what I did find, and what I was so happy to learn, is that the tickets were sold out. The tickets were sold out, and I am so grateful to see and to learn of the support that we have in here, for all of you to come here. That was a very pleasant surprise. And there's so many people here who are willing to learn, who are willing to support, and to see how we can move forward. And that was a great lesson today.
Thank you. I think the thing perhaps that Karolina learned late, which was crushing, was that she had a named seat in the second row waiting for her the whole day, and she never took it. So, one other one. Trevor, how about you?
What was the question again?
What does it mean to have something in the oven from your wife's perspective, was the question.
A little one.
Let's just leave them there for a while, folks. What did you expect to learn today, and what have you learned today?
What I expected to learn today was just more about what really happened. I mean, growing up on the reserve, I mean, I always heard stories from the older guys about what happened, stuff like that. And what I did learn, it's really heartwarming to know we got people like Charlie and is it Dave? Charlie and Dave that are actually going against them. And it was just a big shock to me to see non-Aboriginals fighting for us. Where on the reservation, you don't really see that. It's always us fighting against Canada, stuff like that. You don't ever see a person with different color skin fighting for us. So it was really good to find that out.
Great. Thank you. Matt?
I have to admit I'm a relative newcomer to sort of the fight of the Indigenous person and their plight. When coming into this, I was hoping to learn more about the, I guess, the history of the people who sort of fought some of the battles already, and their experience, for better or for worse. And that's certainly what I got. It's been quite an eye-opener to hear firsthand some of the macro injustices that have been perpetrated. And somewhat at the same time uncomfortable to learn more about my own role as a Jesuit, our role in those injustices as well. So yes, it's certainly been an eye-opening experience from people who have, like I said, who are at the top and have fought the battles at that level.
So I think the thing that we've heard, I think from each of you, and I think from all of our speakers, from everyone in the crowd today, there's a great deal of goodwill about finding a more restorative, integrative way forward. But this raises the question, it was, I think, starkly raised by that beautiful reading of Dan George's poem. Now that we're at 150, what next? What are some of the barriers, before we talk about the bridges, what are some of the barriers that you see to really implementing, let's say, the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Go ahead.
I can only speak from, I guess, what I see in sort of the community that I'm in. I think that the biggest barrier would be ignorance, whether it's willed or unwilled. I'll give an example of my own life. I'm from Winnipeg originally, and my first memory of an encounter with an Indigenous person is when I would drive, or my parents would drive, from my home in the very northeast tip of the city to maybe the south or anywhere else. And you have to go through the downtown and the north end. And that's when I would see the effects of what we're talking about today. Poverty, abuse, substance abuse, etc. And as a small child, that left an impression on me. And with that picture, with the image of the person on the sidewalk, there was no context, there was no background. I didn't know about his or her life or the historic injustices that he or she has faced and the continuing persecutions he or she faces. And for quite some time, I wasn't interested in learning more about that until the reasons, until that history started knocking on my door and I couldn't avoid it. And from that point on, it changed not only my mind, but my heart as well to become more involved in this issue and to work towards creating a more just and mutually respectful relationship. And so I don't think I'm unique or alone. I think that might be the case with many people who would just rather turn a blind eye or who only see what's in front of them and don't know the before or the after. And so I think that that's the greatest barrier facing people who live comfortable suburban lives, is that you can't afford to be disconnected and not know and choose not to know more. And I think that's the greatest barrier that needs to be overcome.
Thank you. On the question of this barrier, and also related, I think, perhaps to education, before lunch, Trevor, you'd asked the Right Honourable Paul Martin a very provocative and interesting question, I thought, about the place of traditional practices related to hunting, fishing, and also, of course, you're talking about language. And we talked a little bit about this at lunch as well. What are some of the barriers that you see to kind of a positive way forward that respects and keeps alive those very practices?
I mean, as far as language goes, our community is pretty lucky. I mean, we got immersion going up to right through high school, but a lot of the places don't have it. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of the poorer a lot of the poorer First Nations don't have the same opportunities as we do, or they don't have the same funding as we do. Like Abram said during lunch, we're the second biggest First Nation reserve in Canada. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's a funding issue, but for hunting and trapping being traditional and going that way, like you see the reserves up north that are, it's $10 for a bag of milk or something like that. Why not get the youth out in the woods hunting? Mm-hmm. I mean, like the one person said, if they're sitting in school starving all day and not knowing where their next meal is going to come from, I mean, teach them to get in the woods.
But who should be doing the teaching though? Like in practical terms, in that moment, how do we solve that problem?
It'd be just other hunters of the community. Mm-hmm. I mean, just help one another out.
And in your own community, do you see goodwill in that area? Do you see people that would be interested?
Yeah, but it's the same as anywhere. There's goodwill and then there's not, right?
Right. And are the kids open to it?
Not really. I mean, in my eyes, where I'm from, it's not really.
So that's in some ways and is that maybe so the barrier shared in that sense is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Even if you want to do this, you want to impart this knowledge.
But not everybody else might want to learn it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Karolina, barriers?
I think there's a lot of barriers that we can talk about, and there's many of them that we heard about today. I heard many talk about systemic discrimination and racism, and that is huge barriers in educational correction system and so on and so forth. One of the bigger barriers, I think, is the denial that those exist. So if you can't admit that there are judges and juries who are prejudiced, then how are we going to change those statistics in the correction systems, for example? So we have to face up that it's there, that it exists. Another big barrier, I think, is when our own people internalize that. Our own people internalize that, and we believe that we can't change. And we have to believe that each one of us can change this trend. And I know my aunties here in the community talk about being that rock in the water. You have to be that rock in the water and let that water just flow around you. Be that rock in the water. We have to believe that we can change this. But that's what happens when you grow up in a society where people have been told, when you've been told, when our parents, my dad went for a brief period to the mush hole which is the Mohawk Institute. It's not very long, but from what I understand, I wouldn't want to leave my child there for 30 seconds, you know? And what was broken there was spirit, you know? They're trying to break people's spirit and to really hate everything about themselves and where they come from. And how are you going to function in society when you can't look at yourself and love yourself? So what we see at Council Fire are people that are coming in that are finding that pride again, who want to know who they are and where they come from. So for us, that's a big challenge, is trying to help these people, trying to help everyone, trying to help ourselves to understand it and to believe in ourselves that we can do it. You know, that's what it is. But we've been internalizing this. We've been told by, the only time you ever hear Native people mentioned in media is usually when it's something negative. You know, we have a lot of success stories in our communities, a lot of success stories. We don't hear those. You know, and I feel that one of my biggest responsibilities as a parent of a little 6-year-old is to try and infuse that passion and that pride in him, right? To try and get him engaged, right? But it requires a little something from all of us, and I think someone else mentioned that here today, that it's all about accountability, that we're all accountable for that.
Thank you. Luke?
So I think the biggest barrier for me would be the lack of education. So again, growing up in the schools, not learning about it. Again, so I was fortunate enough to learn about it here at St. Mike's, but if more courses, more professors were able to incorporate not just, you know, the bad or the past, but the good and what we can do in the future into the courses. Or when the Right Honorable Paul Martin was talking about not just the segmented teaching style, but more of a holistic view, and trying to incorporate those teaching methods into non-Indigenous schools and for everyone here. And then also maybe a barrier would be, or that I feel that I might have experienced, is not having as many opportunities. So to interact with non-Indigenous people. So luckily I have been recently, but maybe other students don't feel, or they're not aware of the opportunities, and so maybe to engage those students.
Great. Well, thank you. That speaks to one of the specific line items, sort of related to call to action number 62. It's on the back of all of your tickets. Is a reference to making it possible for post-secondary institutions, universities and colleges, to begin to incorporate Indigenous perspectives and teaching methods into broader curriculum. And I'd asked Karolina this question just outside before we came on, and she kind of gave me, "Are you kidding me?" answer. Like, I mean, that's a big, big question. But I wonder if even in small ways, thinking about your own sort of educational lives, those of your children, if you could think of a way that you could imagine sort of welcoming that perspective, that teaching method, what would that involve? And this is perhaps getting us towards the possibility of some bridges. Well, Luke, you got the mic. Why don't you go first?
Oh, okay, yeah. So if you're saying the barrier is a lack of education, then I would say the bridges to educate people to have these types of events or conversations, dialogues like these. I think in an article I read in the National Post with Paul Martin, he was asked a question about how to incorporate the teaching styles into these teaching styles. And one of the things he said was that, of course, museums, going to museums or learning through guest speakers are good, and there's nothing bad with them, but maybe might be better is to take non-Indigenous students and bring them out to Indigenous communities and have, face-to-face time to build relationships, learn about their history, their culture for non-Indigenous students. And then, but I still like guest speakers, having those kinds of events, and those are, that's another way, I think. I know Noel was saying earlier that when he was giving a talk, he asked who had heard of the Holocaust, and everyone put up their hand, and he asked who had heard of the North American Holocaust, and no one really knows. And so I think by informing students, engaging them in these types of conversations to learn about these issues would be a way to bridge that.
Can I just add on?
Yeah, please.
When the Jews had their Holocaust, half the world went to aid to them, but like the residential schools, who came to our aid? Nobody. So this is a foot in the door for somebody to say, look, we messed up and we need to make things right. But why was it Canada went all the way across overseas to help them when they couldn't even help us. Like, they treat us like they don't want us here.
Do you feel like at this point, do you think it's changed at all, though? I mean, I think if you think about the context of a conversation like today, of the TRHC process itself, do you see any hopefulness here? I guess I'm asking you the bridge question now.
Yeah, I mean, there's people that do make the effort, and then also, again, there's a lot more that don't make the effort. We need to educate them, the rest of them, like, look, this is how the First Nations people see stuff, and this is how they think. I mean, to be honest, like, let's face it, we don't have the same point of view as non-natives do. That's one thing that a non-native will never understand.
What, never understand?
They're never going to understand our point of view.
So then, couldn't education do something, though, to at least reveal the recognition of that, perhaps, if nothing else?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, you got me. And now I asked him the question about the oven, now I'm stuck. Let's move down the line a little bit. On the question of bridges and also of how we could adopt,
well, I can just continue with what he's saying, and I can attest to that. Actually, my mother is Swedish and my dad is Sonoida, Delaware, and actually grew up in just south of Stockholm, Sweden. I don't necessarily look native. So I grown up with white privilege. You know, that's a big word, and it exists, you know, and I understand. I thought I understood what minorities were going through, and I did not. I did not understand that. I could empathize with it, but it wasn't until I moved to Canada and reconnected with my family, was refused service at restaurants, you know, had people say fucking wagon burners yelling at us, you know, that's when I finally understood what it was like to be part of a minority, and an Indigenous minority at that, you know. And when we talk about education, that education has to start at home. It has to start at home. My little 6-year-old was so happy about starting kindergarten, going to junior kindergarten, and it took a few weeks. He came home and he was crying. And he was crying because the other kids were teasing him about his long hair. And when I went to, of course, I'm not the kind of person you want to mess with, so I go through school, and I was hungry, and it was hot, and I kind of lost it a little bit on the teacher, because the teacher was talking to me like I'm a big kid. Well, you know, maybe this and that child, in their little world, Karolina, maybe they have never seen a boy with long hair before, so maybe they're just making an observation, and God, you do not say that to me. You know, to me, that's in complete denial. So what do? I go straight to the principal, right, and make sure I got leave a paper trail. The good thing that came out of that was they actually had a Ojibwe class at this school, and it's here in Toronto. It's a TRHC school. And I found out a few weeks later, all those little kids, all those little white kids that was teasing my boy, they're all going to a Ojibwe class, which I thought was awesome. I think Kaiwa was the only Ojibwe, because his dad is Ojibwe with Potawatomi. I think he was the only Ojibwe in there. And actually, some of the kids that were teasing him became his best friends. You know, but they learned that somewhere. They learned that somewhere. So that education has to start at home. We make a decision. How are we going to impact this world? Are we going to have a ripple effect that's good or that's bad? You know, and that all of you in here have kids, you have grandkids. If you don't have kids and grandkids, you have little cousins, you have little nieces and nephews that look up to you, and they watch you, and they learn from you what you say and what you do. You know, and they bring this to school, and it starts as early as kindergarten. They start noticing that, right? So that's when it starts. And in terms of post-secondary, you got that big frown from me, because I'm like, to me, our educational system is mainstream. I find it hard to think of ways to indigenize that, you know, but if we're going to, I think the same thing, that interactions with First Nations communities, First Nations peoples, is the way to do it. You know, it's just, our ways are different. Our ways are different. Our people learn in our communities, and our communities need to believe in themselves that they can educate their own people. That's where I think it's at.
Thank you. Yeah.
Being who I am, it's very rare to experience any form of discrimination. The only only experience I had that came close to that was when I spent 6 months in downtown Kingston, Jamaica, working there, and I was the only white person in a black ghetto, a black slum, and I stood out very, very clearly. But then again, I got to leave after 6 months and go back to comfort and everything else. And so I think there's always going to be a certain disconnect of in some way. That, I mean, when I saw that bill that Grand Chief Joe Norton presented us, I saw the two rivers, but I never saw them ever converge. I never saw the canoe and the tall ship become one different ship. That was probably the mistake we made so many years ago, isn't believing that that could actually happen. But with that said, that doesn't mean we can't respect the other boat, that there is a chain that connects them, and that chain can be honored and tended to, and something very strong can come about by doing that. And so I think in terms of education, perhaps the biggest thing we can teach people from I guess the non-Indigenous communities is somehow convey the experience, somehow engender a sense of empathy in our students, so that it's not just purely academic or abstract, but something that they can actually feel and something that can transform them to actually wanting to work for a stronger relationship, a deeper sense of respect and understanding. And I guess that's what hopefully will be working for.
Thank you. I have one more question for each of you, and I think in many ways it speaks right to what you were just describing rather eloquently about what next, and also to Karolina's point about education from the very beginning. And it has to do with the question of responsibility, right? That each of us in this room, on this panel, each of us has a certain amount of responsibility as fellow human beings, as members of various communities, to do something. And so I'm curious. Each of you, based on your time here today, based on your reflections and experiences beyond here, but informed by what you've learned and heard and been part of today, what do you personally each intend to do now? I intend to learn how to get long hair as a boy. It's going to take me a while.
The other lesson that I learned in the slum, other than that I was very, very pale and could sunburn easily, was that you can only do so much in your own world, in your own bubble, in your own context, that as much as I would like to, I could not change the world. I could not make it a better place as a whole, but I can do my own little part with what I have, and to do what I can with that. And so I think for myself, I'm involved at St. Anne's Parish. I give the occasional presentation on the life of St. Kateri to church groups. That presentation doesn't end when St. Kateri dies. I take the conversation forward to the 21st century and talk to the people in the group I'm presenting to what our relationship is as the Catholic Church, as our parish, to the Indigenous people, and sort of the effects of our shared history. And so this conference has inspired me to sort of redouble my efforts in trying to do more in my own context. And I think if everyone did that, the little people such as myself to the politicians, the world could be a better place if we all chip in together. But the trick is to convert people so they can all do their own little thing. And if everyone did their own little thing, something very big could happen, I think.
Thank you. Trevor?
So the question was, what do I plan to do after this?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a tough one.
Check your email.
I mean, inform the youth of what goes on or what went on and how the Jesuits are trying to make things right again and trying to build a relationship between the First Nation and the Church, I guess.
Good. Very nice. Thank you.
So I do agree with Matthew that being here today has inspired me to go back into my own community and look at ways that I can play a role in implementing the call to action. So even, you know, when Dr. Mary Wilson was saying that a lot of people haven't read the calls to action, it's not that long, right? There's only 12 pages, and even, you know, certain ones apply, or certain calls apply to different people. So even if you can just look at a few and try to implement that in your own life, I think that would be beneficial. As a student leader at St. Mike's, some people were talking about, speakers today were talking about, you know, informing people through maybe an online course or something. So trying to provide that or try to push for that at St. Michael's College. Maybe having more events like this. It doesn't have to be, you know, a big formal event, but even just conversations with other students at St. Michael's College. Maybe if we're able to have a group of students take a trip to the cultural center, or have another chance to interact with Indigenous students and to try and learn from them, and just to engage as many students here at St. Mike's as possible to learn and get a deeper understanding. I think that would be a great opportunity.
If only you knew the principal and could ask him to fund that. That's called a hint, a very public hint. But let's go on, Karolina.
Ooh, big question. I guess I'm just going to keep on keeping on. You know, I think that we do some awesome, good work at Council Fire already. We also have a lot of other members in the room today who are from the Restorative Relations Working Group, and they're from different denominations working together with us. So we actually plan and coordinate and host events that has to, you know, in the wake of TRHC. But my most important role is being a mom. That is my most important role. At the end of the day, you know, and my family has gone through a lot too. You know, we have a lot of survivors in my family. My dad struggled his whole life with violence and addictions, and my son's father comes from a family that had to struggle a lot too. So at the end of the day, my most important role is just to be the best mom that I can be, to break that cycle. To me, that's really, really important for him to understand his true history. You know, and if he doesn't know his songs, if he doesn't know his ceremonies, that's not your fault, it's my fault. I have a responsibility as a parent to start taking my child to see his family more, to start going back to our community. And it's my responsibility to teach my son and to teach other people that we have the capacity. We have the capacity to govern ourselves. We have the capacity to heal ourselves. I'm very grateful for everyone's support in here today who are non-Native, very grateful, you know, but in the end, you guys are there on the sides cheering us on, right? Because we have to do a lot of this work ourselves, and we have that capacity, we can do it. We come from nations that still have our own traditional government. Even though it's not recognized by Canada, we still have our clans, our chiefs, our clan mothers, our faith keepers, they're all there. And even the communities that might not necessarily have it right now, there's still people that are alive that remember those family lines. And that's the work that we have to do. This is what I'm going to be teaching my son. And that no matter where he goes, he's always going to be the same person. It's not tied to a reserve. It's not. You're the same person no matter where you go. All of this land is our land.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll ask you to continue your applause and Thanksgiving to Luke, to Trevor, to Karolina, and to Matt for this lovely panel. Thank you.